I feel that in terms of a bunch of communities surrounding something like a game or an anime, especially when the said community is first made, there's always a fear that it'll become an awful place like some of those before it. And to be fair, after the dumpster fires of the past, I can't exactly blame people for feeling this way. Just recently, I remember all anyone would talk about is how Cuphead was getting a bad fandom, when in reality, it was nowhere near the other hellholes, at least not yet. So the question on my mind is this way of thinking valid? With the influx of more and more fans, does a fandom just go to garbage by default, like everyone seems to believe? Hello everyone, this is the RPG Monger, and to say this topic has been on my mind for a while would be an understatement. With all the talk I do about the bad aspects of fandoms, I think it's about time we take another look at just what leaves them as dry husks of their former selves. Though, before we can look at the crumbling collapse, I feel the rise to fame is absolutely necessary to look at. Now, for something to acquire a large fandom and in turn become popular, it has to start somewhere. But the deal is, depending on just where that somewhere is, it can have the power to affect how the fandom grows, doesn't grow, and spreads across the internet. Take the fandoms of kickstarted indie games. In their case, a fandom is already created from the start due to the backers already rallying together to produce such things as fan art before the game is even released. And once the game is in fact released, well, considering how a good bunch of these projects will have over 1,000 backers, or at least the ones that go big do, all of those backers will immediately bombard a multitude of sites to proclaim the good word of their beloved game. Out of the many methods that fandoms grow, this is definitely one of the more effective. But wait, what if the creator or whatever the fandom is based around was already more or less known throughout the internet? Well, then that just means an even larger spontaneous burst of a fandom, as then those familiar with the person's work will only serve to create an even larger presence of the soon-to-be fandom online. Well, now let's factor out all of that and say that maybe there's a game or show that just came out without anyone really knowing about it. It then develops a small cult following, and that's just about it, really. Then, however, an online personality such as a YouTuber covers it, and boom! Just like that, all of their fans combine with that cult following to produce a formidable fandom. And if it becomes a trend in terms of covering that said thing, then who even knows how popular that thing could become? Well, I guess we do have one shining example of that, and that's just listing a few of the ways that fandoms can be born. What you must be wondering is, how does it have anything to do with the fandom's death? Well, when it comes to popularity with fandoms, it all depends on the type of popularity they're getting. For instance, maybe the fandom isn't even that large compared to others, but due to some people talking about how awful the members within it are, maybe for example due to all the fans coming from the YouTuber being mostly young, all of a sudden it attracts a completely different type of popularity. Infamy. Now, becoming infamous can practically become a death sentence for a fandom, as the effects it causes can be very damaging to not only the loyalty that the members of the fandoms have to the fandom, but also to the chance of any new people joining it whatsoever. As a recent example, just look at Rick and Morty. While that fandom is still alive and kicking, with its majority being decent people, the actions of a very vocal minority have basically given the fandom a gigantic label on the internet, effectively shoving them in with the rest of the fandoms given similar labels. While this really is extremely unfair in my opinion, unfortunately that's just how the internet seems to function at this point, as along with everything I just said, people will also become ashamed to even be a part of the fandom and end up leaving due to all of the pressure coming from all over the internet. Hell, with an even more topical example, consider Killing Stalking's fandom, which I only just covered a week ago. I myself have witnessed countless people straight up calling fans of the series glorifiers of abuse. It's an absolute shame how common things like these are, and really worrying how far they will go just because of the actions of only a few people. The fact that there are actual anti-fandom groups whose sole purpose of existing is to just attack a certain fandom and harass its members only further shows how infamy can create an infinite amount of problems for a fandom. But believe it or not, just by observing tons and tons of examples, it seems like infamy only has a part of a hand in actually causing the quote-unquote death of a fandom. While toxicity can also lead to it, the other Another main factor would undoubtedly be infighting. At their cores, the sole purpose fandoms should even serve in the first place is to just be a place where people can discuss the thing the fandom is centered around with ease, and basically share in the love of that said thing. But with things from ship wars to harassment to plain elitism, these supposed safe spaces get absolutely riddled with toxicity. To give an example of this happening, take this story from the Free fandom. So to start off, we have our doomed protagonist. Let's call her Go. Now Go was up late at night and got inspiration to make a blog post about certain characters and their relationships within the show. Nothing bad about that, right? Well, unfortunately, that post was on Tumblr, which is never a good thing in these scenarios. After finishing her post, she went to sleep feeling proud about defeating her writer's block. Well then, next morning, it began. 8 messages had appeared in her inbox, all accusing her of quote-unquote attacking and discrediting the, may I remind you, fictional relationships. If you've experienced these kinds of things before, you just ignore them and move on with your day, but not Go. She made the deadly mistake of engaging them. At first, they weren't that bad, but with every reply, they not only grew in number, but became increasingly rude. Of course, then one of the little roaches even went on to make a passive-aggressive post attacking her as a person. As time went on, this began to spread within the fandom, with more and more posts popping up attacking her and straight up putting words in her mouth. Mind you, this is only on the second day. Once the third day passes and she disables her messages, then people begin making full-on rebuttal posts linking to her blog, effectively painting a pretty clear target on her back. What was once a fun place to share thoughts about Free had in turn become a cold environment Go didn't even feel welcome in anymore. Situations like these are exactly what I'm talking about, because while infamy can only do so much when you can just as easily ignore most of it, when even your own fandom rejects you in this harsh and uncalled for way over something as minute as a single blog post, then what's the point of even staying within the fandom? Above everything I've seen, nothing will make a fandom bleed members more than rampant infighting. Now wait a second, we've talked about negative popularity, but what about positive popularity? There's no way that could kill a fandom, right? And well, you'd be correct. Positive popularity only encourages a fandom's healthy growth into a genuinely fun place to be. I mean, hell, just take a look at Pokemon's fandom. While of course you'll find your bad eggs if you look hard enough, the fandom is arguably one of the most popular out there, with fandom art being produced by the daily. Though despite all of this, Pokemon's fandom is nowhere near dying, and considering that, do fandoms really ever die at all? I mean, sure, they'll be weakened by all the circumstances I've stated, but do they really ever completely die off? Well, my friends, the answer from the biggest fandom to the smallest following is no. Even if it becomes more inactive than it once was, fandoms never truly die. Like, just take a look at Hitalia. You barely see anything from that fandom nowadays, considering how massive and vocal they once were, but believe it or not, the fandom is still quite alive and kicking, much to my surprise. And that's not the only example. Take the fandom for Off, an indie RPG Maker game that came out nearly 10 years ago now. Even it has a small cult following to this day. By the way, go play Off, it's a really good game. Though before I get too sidetracked, here are all of my final thoughts on the matter. There are many ways that fandoms can get popular, and there are many ways that fandoms can lose that popularity. Sometimes both will happen in a matter of months. Though while fandoms can be absolutely crippled and seen as absolute hellscapes in the general public's eye, there will always be a few who keep the fandom alive and well, even after all the dust has settled. So to prevent fandoms from shriveling up, please don't contribute to the infighting. I swear, if people just ignored those said people who create those dumb wars, instead of fandoms becoming a crappy place for the same people, it'd end up becoming a crappy place for them, and the peace would be maintained. In the end, as always, if you want your fandom to stay safe and pleasant to be in, just be nice. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more like it, do subscribe, and today's cool thing of the day is Paranoia Agent. Coming from someone who has previously seen all of Satoshi Kon's previous works, Paranoia Agent has been a must-watch for a while for me, and with me finally getting around to watching the show, I was not disappointed. With it starting out as a pretty normal detective anime, what the variety of plot twists mold it to be by the end is truly something else entirely. entirely. Though if you are familiar with Satoshi Kon, that this really shouldn't be that surprising. While the show does have its downs occasionally, if you want a thought-provoking series that'll make you wonder just what's going to unfold next and how, Paranoia Agent is the anime for you. I mean, come on, besides all of that, the art alone is already gorgeous enough for an enjoyable watch. So that being said, I'm the RPG Monger, and don't forget that each and every one of you are fantastic.